Welcome into another episode of Odd Man Rush. I'm Will Highland. It's Kyle Diezel coming to you on a Wednesday, or coming to you in your device on a Wednesday. We're recording on a Tuesday. So I hope you're having a great week. Kyle, it's been a while since we talked hockey. Last time we've got some baseball breaking news. Oh, I already knew about that. That was Max Fried to the Yankees. Okay, we're gonna put that away. Um, Where was I? Oh, yes. Last time we talked was on, well, we've talked, but last time we talked about hockey was we were at the Garden. We watched the Bruins
Yep.
play the Blues. All right, that was about 3.5 weeks ago. Um, so a lot of things have happened since then. But how are you doing? It's a good week for speaking of baseball. Good week for your Mets. Juan Soto going to the New York. Um, so you must be thrilled.
Yeah, I'm doing all right. Work's been better now that travel's done for myself, so it's
All
been
right.
fabulous. Once out to the Mets, we got to get tickets to go see them when they come to Fenway here, in the summer. That'd be a great time. Um, and that's really it. Just besides it becoming the holiday season, you know,
Yeah.
somehow it's gonna be 50 degrees here tomorrow on Wednesday, so I
Yep. The
don't get
Diesel
it.
weather
So
report. Gotta have
it's
it.
great, wonderful. We'd love to see it. Hopefully when I go back to Vermont, it will be a white Christmas. But hey, you never know.
No, it's gonna be stick season, dude. I mean, it's gonna rain and all that snow is gonna be gone. Have you got your shopping done?
uh, yes, my shopping is fully complete except for our Santa swap since we started.
Same, actually. I hope we don't have each other. Maybe we do. For those of you
I just
who are completely in the
whoever
dark,
is my Santa probably don't expect it to like after the holidays at the rate that everything is going.
yes, agreed. And for those of you who are listening who aren't sure what the hell we're talking about, we have a Secret Santa group. I'm not gonna say who I have because that person might also be listening, and it could be even be Kyle. So I don't know. We're just gonna leave this out. So I am in the same boat. I have all my shopping done except for that. Now, and we talked already about how it was a good week in New York for Mets fans. Then we talked about shopping. All right, is it safe to say that the New York Rangers did a little bit of
Ooh,
shopping of their own
I like
in
it.
trading Jacob Trouba on Friday to the Anaheim Ducks in exchange for a fourth round pick and Earl Vakanainen? Now, Kyle, you and I both know Jacob Trouba, the captain of the New York Rangers, he was featured in that Amazon series. And he's been a mainstay there since starting his career in Winnipeg. Now he's on the other side of the country. What do you make of that trade? It's in the Rangers in general, because that wasn't the only move they made on Friday. I'll let you take the mantle from here though.
Yeah, I mean, for the Rangers, it's kind of a start. I mean, this year has not been what they kind of expected. The team chemistry is just not there offensively. For Trouba to go away, to trade your captain away, beginning of the season, to me is kind of like a wake up call in a way for that team. I'm not sure if it's going to wake him up at all. We'll see. Still too early to tell. But it does open up. It takes his salary out of the way, get him to the Ducks. I think for both teams, it is kind of a little bit of a win for the Rangers, but not overall because you trade your captain away. But he's also been the trade talk since the end of last year, as we talked about before. For the Ducks, that's you're taking out a huge contract. I mean, you've got lots of money to spend. I don't know why you would accept this. If I'm then, and then you go on and sign Igor Shesterkin to an extension. Afterward, to me, it's like a slap in the face to your captain, but also a slap in the face to kind of to me, if I was a Rangers fan, I wouldn't be happy about it. I mean, Igor is your guy, but I wouldn't say he's the best goaltender on that team. I'd say Jonathan
At
Quick
this moment,
is
at
better.
this moment, yeah, maybe over the
Jonathan
course
Quick
of that eight
is,
year deal,
I mean, despite if they didn't have either of those two goaltenders right now, this season would be a total flip flop. They would not be potentially even making the playoffs. Is kind of thing as I see it. Um,
yeah.
so I don't know if this is going to help the team or not. I'm expecting at least a big move before the trade deadline. What I'm seeing, I'm not sure what revamps this team or who brings it, but it's definitely they needed a wake up call. Someone needs to bring the energy. I've heard about Matthew Kachuk's brother being a trade option.
Yep, Brady has been talked about.
but I'm not sure if he's kind of the guy that would wake up this team. He could be, but I'm
No,
not sure
I
if
think he would. I think he'd be amazing in New York for the. I mean, not for Eastern Conference fans like you and I who like the Devils and Bruins.
correct. But who
Um,
would you give up for him?
who would they give up? Oh, I don't know what their draft pick situation is. We know the Rangers don't care about picks. Since they drafted Lafreniere, they haven't necessarily drafted near the top anyway. So I,
Correct.
I don't think they care. And they've had good um, they've had good luck with receiving on the trade market. I mean, think about Lindgren, right? Way back in 2018, they traded Rick Nash to the Bruins and ended up with Lindgren. And so I don't think their roster is constructed in a way where they have to rely too much on their draft picks. I think they can, I think they can sort of survive as they have the last few years leading up till this
Mhm.
one. I'm looking at their roster, Kyle, and you're right. There's not a ton of movable guys on this roster, unless you went full blockbuster, and traded someone like Keandre Miller.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think there's really that many movable pieces on the Rangers if they wanted to go get Brady Tkachuk, except for draft picks, um, or if they really shook it up and traded like Chris Kreider. I would say he's been talked about, and they have said. I guess he's the only other guy I would point out but that to me wouldn't be a surprising move because they've
No.
openly talked about how they want to trade Chris Kreider.
Correct.
So, like, it would have to be a draft pick, Chris Kreider, maybe somebody else off your roster because the Senators, they're not going to trade the foundational aspect of their team, which is Brady Kachuk up there. They're not going to trade him for nothing. He's got 2 years left on his deal. Um,
Correct.
I don't think they're gonna. I don't think they're gonna do that. But I don't know what the fix is for the Rangers. Maybe it's addition by subtraction. They're just hoping Truba gets out of the way. The issue is, I don't think. I don't think the subtraction of Truba is a cure-all for their
No.
issue. Um, and you clearly have committed to a core group because you have Panarin signed and you have now Shesterkin signed and
Hmm.
the rest of that roster is you know Adam Fox and Ryan Lindgren are great, but the rest of that roster you might raise your eyebrow and wonder how it's going to look in a couple of years. I guess the good news for the Blue Shirts is that this Eastern Conference is not exactly full of world beaters. Everyone has a flaw. The Florida Panthers had a skid.
Hmm.
The Toronto Maple Leafs, we know what they are come spring. The Bruins have been up and down. That's the Atlantic Division. The Metro, your Devils, looking pretty good, but
Capitals.
but they're not perfect. The Capitals, yes, but they're not like miles ahead of
No.
anyone.
No.
So the Hurricanes haven't played a ton of games. They're doing they're really good at home. Um, but I guess the good news for the Rangers is they're still in the mix. They're still in the mix. The season isn't completely gone. So maybe that's why they felt they had to make this move. Now, you mentioned the Ducks. Do you not think it's a good trade for the Ducks? See, I do, and I'll explain why in a second, but just confirm for me. You think the Rangers won this trade?
I think the Rangers won this trade because it opened up more space. So when they do try to go for a big deal name, as we just mentioned, Brady Kachuk, it allows them to have that extra money and that salary cap to make more of a bigger impact for them, or at least for someone big name, because that's what they're probably going to go for. For the Ducks, I mean, they bring in a veteran player, which is what they need. They need a true veteran in that locker room. They have a couple guys, very young team. Definitely can spark the energy, but I just don't see him being the impact player as he was here in New York. Unless he's able to rally those guys, I just don't see it.
Well, I don't think the Ducks are looking for him to be an impact player. I think the Ducks are looking for him to be a leader. That roster is pretty young,
They
but
don't have a captain. I don't believe they have a captain this year.
I don't know for sure. You might be right. I don't know. But that roster's pretty young. McTavish,
Mm.
Gauthier. Looking at the rest of that roster, it's pretty young roster, a lot of guys that I've never heard of. Um, and I'm looking at where they think he's gonna slot up with Cam Fowler on that first pair. And you've got Brian Dumoulin and Radko Gudas. I mean, that top four is pretty beefy. I wouldn't want to be, Cole Caulfield or
No.
Nick Suzuki or Brad Marchand or another undersized player
Well,
going
at
up.
least he's out west, so you don't have to worry too much.
What was that?
He's out west at least, so you don't have to worry
That's
about him.
true. It's true, but I'm thinking about some of the smaller players, like how about Mason McTavish at practice?
Too.
Um, or sorry, Trevor Zegras at practice or somebody like that. Um, so I think the Ducks actually win the trade. And the reason why for me is they bring in leadership. You got a bunch of young players around. I think Trouba's going to be around next year, possibly the year after. He didn't have that many years remaining on his Ranger deal. But he's going to be 32, 33 by the time he's done in LA unless they trade him, excuse me, in Anaheim, unless they trade him. So I think the Rangers didn't really get a whole lot back. They got Urho Vakanainen and a fourth round pick for for reference. I believe the Bruins traded Urho Vakanainen and a first for Hampus Lindholm back in the day, and so and Hampus Lindholm and Jacob Trouba. Trouba's now older than Hampus was then. And so I'm wondering the Ducks, they've got money, could they have taken on more of that money in exchange for maybe a better player going back to New York? So that's why I just think that the Ducks win this trade because they bring leadership to a place that needs it. Um, and as far as the Rangers are concerned, perhaps you're right in pointing out that the Rangers sort of win the trade because they clear the money to spend on Igor. If you look at it that way, maybe I can be convinced. But do you have any thoughts on the Igor extension? It's a huge contract. I know you said he wasn't the best player or the best goalie
I'm
on
not
the
afraid to admit it. He's not the best goaltender right now on that team. He's number two. He technically is number one, but I see him as number two stats wise. Jonathan Quick has played much better, especially even last year, played much better than he has since he's had that injury. I do think long term, to be honest, I think for some reason the Rangers just don't know how to win Stanley Cups with goaltenders, and I think Shesterkin's going to be that second round of goaltender that never wins a cup
like
in New York.
Henrik, um, like
Henrik
Henrik
Lundqvist.
Lundqvist?
Yep. I
Yeah,
don't think
well,
I don't think they're going. The team they have now, if it stays this consistent, they don't make major changes. I mean, he's still got a long contract. Don't get me wrong, but the way the Metropolitan is starting to develop, I don't see them having a chance.
the one thing, well, I think they'll always have a chance because they're the New York Rangers. Okay, this is what I always say about most original six teams is they can bend over and sign big contracts as long as they somehow figure out their cap space because they're always going to be a destination. Whether that's for somebody like Patrick Kane, who we saw a couple years ago, or somebody like Brady Tkachuk in the future, or any of these other upcoming free agents, like I think about a guy like Brock Besser or something, um, who's going to be a free agent. These are all players that may or have wanted to go to play in New York and play at MSG and play for the Rangers. And that sucks for you and me as a Bruins fan and a Devils fan, but the Rangers do have that draw. And I don't blame them for signing Igor long term. 2 years ago, he had one of the best seasons the goalie's ever had. And while you're right in that Quick is playing better right now, Quick is 38 and he's on the last year of his deal. They're not re-signing him. Okay? So they're going to pay Igor next year. And right now they have approximately, I just looked it up, they have approximately 7.1 million in cap space right now. And in the offseason, it's probably going to be more than that if you look at some of these other contracts they have coming off the books, like Riley Smith, who makes 3.75, um, or Ryan Lindgren, who's going to be a free agent as well. Um, so that's the mixture I'm looking at in New York is they kind of had to sure up somebody because they didn't want to go into the offseason with Riley Smith and Ryan Lindgren and Igor all unsigned. And I think that would have been disastrous. But they're the New York Rangers. I have a feeling there's, unfortunately for you and me, they're still going to be competitors. But speaking of goalies, Kyle, there was a goalie trade. So why don't you walk us through this goalie trade and what you think about that? Because Colorado certainly addressed the need, or at least they hope they did.
Yeah, they trade for Mackenzie Blackwood from the Sharks with, I don't know if I'm saying his name right, Guinevere Smith for Alexander. I don't even know Georgievy. I think
Georgiev. Yeah, I know it's a weird name. Georgiev, I think is how you say
Georgiev.
it.
I do think for the Avs, this does help solve some of their answers at goaltending, but it depends what kind of Mackenzie Blackwood you get. He was a former Devil, so I understand how he is. He's hit or miss, and this year he's been pretty hit so far. So I think for them, it's a pretty good move. Mostly for Colorado, I think it also adds depth, adding Smith as well because they've been so hurt this year.
Yeah,
With they've had what 6 out of their top 12 forwards hurt so far to start the
yeah.
year. They have a few guys who've come back, but for them, I think this
They've
is a good.
been without Landeskog for like 2 years.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
it's like I said, it's a good move for them. I think it's a good win. And then for the Sharks, they get a second round pick for 2026, a fifth round pick of this upcoming year. Um, and they also got a forward. I forget the forward's name though, but they got a forward as well. So for them, I think it's a good stepping stone. I mean, like we talked about, the Sharks are a good upcoming team. They have the young talent and
yeah, they
players.
do.
So I think for both teams, this is a win. I think for both teams, it's a win-win.
Yeah, I do too. Sometimes there's just what they call hockey trades, which is,
Yeah,
it's not a salary dump, like the Rangers did, and it's not a draft pick swap. It's players for players with a couple picks maybe thrown in there. Um, yeah, I mean, I think Colorado,
that's
they're
always
they're
been the
just they're just too good to not try and maximize this window.
correct.
That's a franchise that's been so long rebuilding. They were drafting at the top of the draft. Like, you go
Mm-hmm.
back maybe 10, 15 years, they were drafting at the top year in, year out. And
Correct.
they're just, I don't think that fan base has the appetite for that. Not 2 years after a cup win. And they're second in the wild card right now. They're edging the Flames. I don't think the Flames are going to stick around. I don't think the Kraken or the Utah whatever's are going to stick around. So I think Colorado's going to be able to push for a playoff spot if they can get healthy and turn their goal differential around. The fact that they, despite all their talent, have a -8 goal differential just shows you how unfortunate both their goaltending situation and their injury situation have been in Denver this year. So
Yeah,
I'm hoping they can turn around because that's a fun team to watch in the spring, especially if you're an Eastern Conference fan like us and maybe our team is going to eliminate it in the second round or whatever. I remember a few years ago, it was really fun watching them on that cup run because of all the great talent they had.
for the current playoff teams in the West, they are the only team minus the Blues and the Flames with a negative point differential in the West.
Yeah, well, both the Blues and the Flames aren't in the playoff mix right now. So, I mean, they're not holding a spot. They're in the mix, but they're not
Yeah,
holding a spot.
they're the
So,
next spot behind them, but everyone else
yeah,
is positive in the points differential, which
yes,
is going to be clutch for them. Um, so it's just going to be tough because that Central Division right this year and right now is just so competitive. I think that's the best conference right now, best division.
yes. Oh, I agree. I think the West is miles better than the East. Even the Pacific. I mean, your Knights are good again. The Kings have won like five in a row. The
The
Canucks are
Canucks
turning it
and
around. If they can get healthy, they're going to be really good. The Oil have been all right, but I think they've also, suffered a little bit and then with the injury bug and stuff. And then the Flames are going to fade, but they've been a cute story. They're a really good team at home. No, but yeah, I think for Colorado, good move. Sure, at least get somebody else in there because what Georgiev wasn't it for them.
No, he
And if
was
they had any sort of goaltending the past couple years, like the Bruins, we had Swayman and Ullmark, right? Like if they had Swayman last year, or if they had Ullmark last year, they're probably going to the conference or Stanley Cup final. Um, but they just didn't have it, and they were able to slide by in 2022 with Kemper because the rest of their team was that good and that dialed in. But you're not going to get that every night. Um,
no. I don't think if they don't get healthy this year, I don't think they're not gonna either make the play. I think they'll make the playoffs, but they won't go far if they don't get healthy.
Yeah, which is too bad because there's a lot of fun players on that team. A lot of guys having a good year, and Mikko Rantanen is a unrestricted free agent come
Yeah.
spring or come summer. So that's something to keep an eye on too. Okay, speaking of things that we had to keep an eye on, last time we talked, we were at the Garden doing a live pod. Monty was in his second to last game as Bruins head coach. They fired Jim Montgomery on November 19th, like 2 or 3 days after we were together at the
Yep.
Garden. And since then, the Bruins, I believe, have played 9 games and they've gone 7-2 under Joe Sacco. And for reference, those 2 losses, I believe, were 1 goal games, or they were empty net games that might have been like a 2 goal game. So
In their
that they
last,
were they were
they are
in those games, and then they also, I believe, lost. They lost to Vancouver 2-0, despite outshooting them 2-1. And they did have a couple of overtime wins in there. So I guess it all comes out in the wash. They're 7-2 under Joe Sacco. What do you make of the Boston Bruins since the departure of Jim Montgomery?
I mean, for them, I think it's kind of like a wake up call, but I also hard to say because the teams they have played in the last 9 games haven't really been too much to like base my opinion off. Really, I mean, it's great for them to get the wins, but the key thing is that I'm looking at also is that goal differential. They're at -8, where they've normally been positive the last few years. It's kind of like the big thing that stands out to me, besides the coaching aspect. But I think the next, gosh, I think that road trip out west, like you talked about, will be key for them. But like I said, they're not really playing anyone that stands out, or haven't played anyone that stands out to me to give me a good judgment on how they're doing.
Well,
Um,
yeah, well, I think the first 20 games they were I couldn't read off the numbers in front of me, but they were like bottom 10 in penalty kill and power play. They were bottom 10 in like expected goals and goals against or goals scored and all this
yeah,
stuff. And that's what got Monty canned. Now that goal differential you're talking about is incredibly swayed by some 8-2 losses to Carolina and Dallas. Um, but I think what's making the Bruins better is that they're getting production out of Marchand offensively. Their
yeah,
penalty kill's been better, and they so a lot of people will point to their schedule, and that's true. They've beaten up on the Canadiens and the Red Wings and the Flyers and whatever, but they also have been doing it all without Hampus Lindholm, who is like I would say their second best, who was their second best player um, so far this season, and he might have been their best defenseman as well. Believe it or not, I think Jonas Corposalo in what they've got out of him this year, he's my early MVP for the Bruins because if he was bad, then this team would, based on the start Swayman had, which wasn't great, would have been near the basement of the division. But I think
yeah.
Corposalo being average or to above average has helped them immensely. And so the fact that they've, yes, beaten up on bad teams, but done it without Hampus Lindholm is a huge testament to the way that Joe Sacco was able to refine their defensive structure in a way that allowed them to compete in games like 3-2 games, 2-1 games, because that's how the Bruins are going to win games. They might pop off once in a while, like they did against the Islanders or the Canadiens, and score 5 or 6. But more often than not, the Bruins are going to win games or lose games 3-2, 2-0, 3-1, 1-0, games like that. And so that has given me uh, positivity. Now, you mentioned the West Coast road trip, and I brought it up, of course, before we started recording. As an East Coast team, you're a fan of an East Coast team too. How much do you think that matters going out on the road for 2 weeks and being in a team bonding environment and doing so right before the holidays and getting that trip out of the way earlier in the year. Do you think that matters? It matters at all?
I mean, I think it does a little bit just because it is a long trip. You're away from home. But there's allowed for a lot more bonding with the team. I think that's the key aspect, how much bonding they can do together. But you're traveling, you're basically on a plane all the entire trip, almost maybe a bus here and there. But it's a long, long time traveling. You're going to be playing either every other night or back to back. So it can be exhausting. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
It can be, but those are games you're going to have to somehow find a way to win. Um, just looking at because they've got to go play the Jets, they've got to go play the Flames, the Kraken, the Canucks, the Oilers. So like 3 out of those 5 teams are probably top 10 teams right now in the NHL. You've got to be able to like squeak out an extra win in there or two. I'd say you have to try to get at least 3 out of those 5 to be
Yeah.
successful. You can't.
If they win 3 out of 5, I think they start tonight in Winnipeg, and
Yeah.
I don't think there is a back to back in there. There may be sometimes Calgary Edmonton is a back to
Nope.
back.
It looks like nope.
Yeah.
It's every night. It looks like.
So if they lose to like the Jets and the Canucks, if they don't, I think the games they're more likely to win, despite the Flames being good at home. They're more likely to beat Calgary and Seattle than they are the other three. But if they can win one of those other 3 games and finish the road trip like 3-2, like you said, you come back home for Christmas and then you pick right back up. You get the Capitals after
Yeah.
Christmas,
They
and then early on in January, I think you get the Leafs again. So yeah,
they've got
it's
to
gonna
January. They need that momentum from this road trip, I would say, to really propel them
yeah
because they got to play the Capitals within 2 weeks. Then you got
yeah
to go play the Rangers, the Maple Leafs. Like January is probably their hardest month to
right
play. So
right
you're playing almost your division, playing mostly the Metropolitan all over again. So like it's going to be a tough month. I think that's going to be the momentum they need. So these five
yeah.
games will be.
And in my opinion, that's why this 9 game stretch where they went 7-2 and they won in overtime on Saturday against the Flyers, I think that gives them like a little bit of juice for
Yeah.
for this road trip. So I'm hopeful for them. Now, they're not the only team to have let go of their coach and turn around. The St. Louis Blues have done the same thing, and in fact, they went and scooped up Jim Montgomery and have since gone. Let's pull the record up here, folks. In their rough, so in their last 10, I don't know exactly how many they played with or without Monty, but they are 5-5. And
4-1.
well, yeah, okay. 5-4-1 if we're gonna get technical there, okay. Um, 5-4-1. Their goal differential still isn't great, but they're in the mix in the wild card.
Yeah.
They're getting some production. Bennington's named to the Canada team. We're gonna talk about that in a little bit. Montgomery has pushed them a little bit. They started off with I think 3 or 4 wins in a row after. Um, so they've responded. Do you see the St. Louis Blues as a playoff team in the spring as it stands right now?
I mean, I think they could get in there. I mean, like I said, we talked about the Avalanche having injuries, and injuries plays a huge part. Utah, I don't see them going to where the I see they could sneak in there as the 8 seed. The 8 seed, I think, is still pretty wide open. I'm not counting the Avs kind of in it with all their injuries, so they could definitely get in there. And I think getting Jim Montgomery is huge for them and that organization because he's going to bring those guys together and give them kind of the business of this is how things are run, this is how we're going to do it, and play to their strengths. And I think that's the key thing is what he does well is play to his players' strengths.
Yes, he got away from that a little bit this year because I think the Bruins sort of ran into fool's gold last year when like JVR and Dan Heinen and all these guys had better years than they've ever had. Um, it was one thing for the Bruins to play Jimmy's style when you had Taylor Hall in your third line and Tyler Bertuzzi on your third line because you were so good and so
Yeah,
deep. But when your third line is, with all due respect, Morgan Geeky and Justin Brazo or whatever, Charlie Coyle or Trent Frederick, you can't really do that. And so, um, for the for the Blues, I think him going in there with a new situation and a new roster to, mix and mingle with, I think gave them a little bit of a jolt. My only issue with them as a playoff team, Diesel, is that for that to happen, the Avalanche have to drop, or you're going to have one of the following teams, either the Oil, the Canucks, the Kings, the Knights, the Stars, the Jets, or the Wild all drop. Now, to begin the year, you and I thought it was going to be Nashville that was in that group. We've been wrong so far in any stretch of the
Woo.
imagination. And in fact, it's been Minnesota that's had a really great start to the year. And what's great about Minnesota is they have a tremendous home ice advantage there in St. Paul, but they've played 11 and 2 and 3 is their record outside on road games. So they've played a lot of road games and they've succeeded well. And so for St. Louis, they're going to have one of these teams, whether it's the Wild or the Kings, who have won 5 in a row. One of those teams is going to have to fall down in order for the St. Louis Blues to vault themselves into the playoff picture. Now, it's December 10th. There's plenty of time for that to happen. But that's just my caution in the wind for Blues fans. But we've seen it before. Trust me. 2019, the Bruins played them in the Cup final. They were a dead team walking in January, and they win the Cup in June. So anything can happen. But that's where I'm at. Okay, I talked about the Predators, but let's talk about the Blackhawks too. Because if those teams are in the basement, the Blackhawks also moved on from their coach. What are we going to do about the Blackhawks and the Predators, Kyle? I had high hopes for both of those teams. I thought the
I,
Blackhawks were going to step toward the playoffs, and I thought the Predators were going to be top 2 or 3 in the division.
I mean, the Predators, we all thought with all the signings, but everyone is once again is hurt, and that team just for some reason doesn't have chemistry. Blackhawks, I kind of figured with their offseason moves, I didn't see them getting any better. And I think that's the reason why they fired their coaches, the players they brought in. It's just not a well gelling team currently. So for them, they've got to go back to the drawing board and figure things out for the future. I don't think anything from this year is going to help them move forward.
Yeah. Well, on the Predators front, I'm with you. They lose Ryan O'Reilly, but again, Ryan O'Reilly, Stanley Cup winner with the Blues.
Mm,
He's a guy who is not getting younger, wasn't getting younger when they signed him, and if they were relying on him to be like a top 6 center, and he's hurt, and so if a guy who's not really supposed to be a top 6 center is hurt, that means that somebody who's probably not supposed to be a top 9 center is playing top 6,
yeah,
and that's what's happened to the Predators because their roster, their first line in a vacuum, you might look at that and say that's pretty good. Forsberg, Stamkos, Nyquist, and or Marchessault, depending on the line. But then immediately there's this gasp when you look at the rest of their roster and how thin they are. So it's not just injuries. It's just I think perhaps we overrated the Stamkos and Marchessault signing because it's one thing for Stamkos to win cups on the Tampa Bay Lightning alongside Braden Point and Victor Hedman and others, and for Marchessault to do the same alongside Jack Eichel and Mark Stone and Shea Theodore and whomever else. But for them to do it on a team that wasn't really that as deep as those other teams, that's the difference.
yeah,
Um, and those guys, I mean, I would love Stamkos on the Bruins. He'd be a perfect two C for us right now, or second line right wing for us. But I don't think for Nashville they really thought that out. I think they might have gotten a little bit trigger happy considering they had a surprising second half last year with a huge
yeah,
winning streak. Um, but it's not turning out this year. And with Chicago, I'm with you. Like they kind of did a little bit of the same. They brought in a bunch of guys who are just guys. Like I like Pat Maroon and I like Nick Foligno and they brought Nick Foligno in last offseason, I believe. But you know, they're not like who they were 5 or 6 years ago. Clearly.
No.
And
There's,
Taylor Hall, I love Taylor Hall. He's one of my favorite NHL players ever, and he won a Hart Trophy playing for your team. He
he's not
played.
getting younger.
He's
He's
not
not.
getting younger. He's not getting faster, and he is a great leader. I think he's a great guy. He's one of the nicest guys in the NHL. Issue for Taylor Hall is his whole career he's been in the wrong place at the wrong time,
Correct.
and that is where he's at again with the Blackhawks. And like Ryan Donato had a good start to the season, but he's not a second line center on a team that's trying to make the playoffs. Not a team that's so young, um, like they are. Like if Ryan Donato was on the Bruins, he'd probably be a second line center. But at least the Bruins have Pasternak and
Yeah.
McAvoy and a bunch of other established guys. If Ryan Donato was on the Devils, he's not. I mean, Nico and Jack, he's playing third line center at
There-
best.
yes.
So I think that's the issue again with Chicago, like with Nationals. Nashville's too old
Mhm.
and brought in has a bottom of the roster that's full of nothing, and then the the Blackhawks have a bunch of guys on the periphery that would be great as a complement, but not as somebody who's trying to advance the team with Connor Bedard as their
Yeah.
future centerpiece. Am I off base with that?
No, you're right on. You're
Yeah.
on the point.
I, it's sad because I really thought like looking at all right, you've got year two of Bedard, Hall's coming back healthy. They added Donato, they've got Teravainen. I thought, oh, they're going to be decent. No, the Chicago Blackhawks are just. I mean, I'm looking at their defense. I've never heard. I follow the NHL pretty closely. I've heard of TJ Brody.
All
That's
right now.
it. So that's an issue. The good thing for Chicago is I think they have room to grow. I'm just wondering, Kyle, and maybe we can transfer in a second to the Four Nations, but do you think Chicago is the most irrelevant sports city in the country right now? For a city that has all four teams plus two baseball teams, I feel like that.
No, I don't think so. I mean, the Cubs had a good year last year.
Yeah, but I mean,
Uh, no, not the
not
Cubs.
good. Like winning, they were okay. I don't. They weren't a playoff team. I think. I mean, they weren't bad. They're
I
not bad, but like the White Sox were the worst team in the history of baseball. The Bears are. I mean, the Bears fired their coach after the most embarrassing thing I think I've ever seen happen. And then the Bulls, I can't even name somebody on the Bulls right now. Like if I tried. And then the Blackhawks have Connor Bedard, but like it's
don't.
right now it's a train to nowhere. So I think Chicago might be the most irrelevant of the major cities that have all four teams.
I mean, it could be. They could be the old fashioned is here on the East Coast. If you're a Jets, Mets, and a Knicks fan, you've had that stretch. I think that stretch is starting to turn over there in Chicago.
Yeah, the other name that brought up to me, or when I brought this up to somebody else, is Phoenix, because the Suns aren't really that good anymore. I know, although they could be the top in the NBA. I have not paid attention to the NBA this year, but like the Suns are a couple years removed from being somewhat good, and having KD.
They just
Uh,
lost their hockey team.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. They just lost their hockey team. They had they did make the World Series a couple years ago. The Diamondbacks did, and then the Cardinals are like.
They have a chance. They still have a chance.
So maybe it's not Arizona, it's not Dallas, it's not LA for sure, it's not San Francisco. Um, it's not Florida,
No,
Miami. I'm trying to think of somebody who has all 14, maybe DC, but
no, Washington's doing
no,
good.
the Commanders are going to make the playoffs.
Yeah, uh,
Yeah.
good. So you can't.
Philadelphia, the Eagles have won 9 in a row or something like that. So it's not Philadelphia,
Philly,
despite the
Philly's
Flyers being bad.
of the choke artist currently. That's what it is right now.
Yeah, the other one I thought for a second was Detroit, but then I realized that the Tigers were actually pretty good last year. And they might be close, but the Lions and the Tigers turning their franchise around in the last couple of seasons has saved that city because if not for that, you're looking at the Pistons and the Red Wings.
Yeah, it has
So
to be. Fortunately,
I think it has to be Chicago. I'm with you. And I like Connor Bedard. I hope he
has
turns
here has a good
yeah, I
career.
hope he turns the corner. But speaking of Connor Bedard, he didn't make the Team Canada team. Um, and a lot of people were disappointed with that. A lot of people were disappointed with these rosters, but I had a pod about a week ago where I talked about this on my own. So I'm gonna let you start us off here. Um, because I want to hear your take because I don't think we've talked about it yet.
My take, okay. So where do I start? I'll start. I don't know. I kind of broke it down to different things of like who I thought were the best forwards, who had the best defensemen, who had the best goaltenders, and then kind of broke down from there. I think overall, for forwards, I think Team Canada has the best forwards picked, and I think that's the reason why Connor Bedard didn't make that team because it's just so stacked of a team. At least forwards.
Yes.
Um, you've got both Sams and the Panthers. Like you have the two reigning Stanley Cup champions. Like you got to bring back Crosby. Hagel's having a great year. Seth Jarvis, Nathan McKinnon, Connor McDavid. Like that team alone is stacked. Like there's nothing you need to even say about that team. You don't even add anything for that forward depth. That's why I think they're the best, going to be offensively the best powerhouse going in. That probably could be the reason why that they might win this year, just because of that alone.
Well, people were saying that like, oh, if they had named Marchand to the team over the summer, I think they named Marchand, Crosby, and and McKinnon like as like
Correct.
the like before the season even started. But like Marchand probably, if it was a true meritocracy, might be like the last guy to make the team.
I mean, I think he's definitely you're probably on that team with him, Mark Stone. I'd say those are that's like your bottom. That if that's your basically your and probably what
Well, they're gonna play. I think they're gonna play Crosby, McKinnon, and Marchand together because they all know each other. They've played together before, and they're all from Nova
yeah.
Scotia. So I think
I
they're
mean
gonna
that
play Marchand with Crosby and McKinnon. Then I think they're gonna have Reinhardt and McDavid with Marner,
I mean you have a whole Lightning's forward line basically. You have Point, uh
Hagel.
you've got Hegel, so that's a whole line right there from the Lightning. You've got so
Yeah,
like
I mean, they're gonna have no issue. I mean, they have Sorelli too. Yes, because it's Sorelli, Hagel, and Braden Point. Um, And then like your best fourth line would be Bennett, Jarvis, Konechny. That would be a great fourth line. But one of those guys is going to have to sit, I guess. And so who that is might be a matchup thing. And then on
correct.
defense, Team Canada's talking down to their defense. But I mean, I see Cale Makar and Alex Pietrangelo. Okay, those guys have won Stanley Cups.
Yeah.
They're also talking down about their goaltending. I see two guys who have won a Stanley Cup on their
Two guys
goal.
that are on there. I mean, the only issue is there that they're just not having great years. Like this is just not a great year for the selection of goaltenders they have. Like Sam's not having a great year. Aiden Hill's probably having a decent year. Jordan Bennington's not having a great year.
Yeah.
Uh, they're probably going to start Jordan Bennington because he's been there, done that.
We are 2 months out from the tournament, so in 8 weeks, Bennington could be on a heater.
Yeah, I think Aiden Hill's probably their best bet. If I had to pick, I'd pick him.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, and the rest of their defense is pretty good too. I mean, Shea Theodore and Devin Taves are also very good,
Yeah,
um, and have won before. So like their defense, they all the lines that they made here. If you count the Stanley Cups, I'm not going to do it because I'm inevitably going to forget one. But I would just raw dog this and look at it and say, let's see, Reinhardt, Marchand. I mean,
they've got
Crosby's got
one
three.
Stanley Cup.
McKinnon's got one. McCarr's got one. I mean, you start looking at Hill and Bennington have one. Mark Stone's got a cup. You start looking at Bennett's got a cup. You start looking at this team and you're like, oh yeah, They pretty much all of them have either been to a cup final or
Yeah, you have
won
over
one.
10 won a Stanley Cup on that team.
What was that?
You have over 10 guys who have won the Stanley Cup.
At least, yeah, and we could be missing somebody. Uh, now let's see. I want to find the U.S. roster here because, with all due respect to Sweden and Finland, I cannot say those names.
I mean, I'm not going to say their names, but they have pretty decent
Yeah,
squad.
like I went over it with on my own pod by myself, and I think people aren't giving Finland enough love. I think Finland could
I,
be really hard to play against. Now,
I
can I
think
pronounce any of those guys' names respectfully? No. Um,
Sebastian Eric Alla,
Eric
forward right.
Holla, I can pronounce that. Yep. That's funny. I can pronounce Eric Holla. That's about it. Uh, but I think they're going to be good, and I think Sweden has a really good defense too, and they've got great goaltending options. But I
I think
really
they have.
want to talk to you about the American roster because this caused you sent me a video. I wanted to wait and talk about it until we did our pod. There's been a lot of like grifty, grindy opinions about who should or shouldn't have got on the team, specifically Tage Thompson and Cole Caulfield being left out. But before we get to that, what do you make of Team USA's approach?
Um, to be honest, I'd say it's like 50-50 for what they have. At least defensively, I think they're pretty solid. Like, I love Faber. He's fantastic. Adam
Yes.
Falk, phenomenal. Quinn Hughes, Charlie McAvoy. Like, defensively and goalies, I'm totally fine with. It's their forwards they picked I have the issue with.
That's what a lot of people have said, and like I get that. I'm just I'm
Like, who do you think shouldn't be on there? Well, to be honest, JT Miller not having a great year. Vanacek not having a great year. Or Chorchek, however you say his
yeah,
name.
yeah,
Now,
Trocheck. Yeah.
Chris Kreider not having a great year at all. That's three
They,
guys right.
he's so bad they want to trade him.
That's what I mean. Like, why aren't you picking guys who are having the most success this year? Because that's what carries over. If you're not having success this year, I mean, it could transit. They could find a success, but you're playing with a whole bunch of different players.
I think so I'm with those guys that were going off about it. I don't know what podcast it is
Like, come on.
that you sent over to me. I'm with you on Tage Thompson. I'm not with you on Cole Caulfield. And I think Cole Caulfield has had a great year, has scored a lot of goals, and probably if this was an Olympic year where they're playing on Olympic ice and you're playing against mostly European teams, then a guy like Cole Caulfield is going to fit that style really well. And he's going to be a great asset for you in like a shootout, which means a lot on as we saw with TJ Oshie back in the day. Those games in the Olympics mean a lot. So I think a year from now, when we're picking the Olympic roster for Italy, he'll be there. And I think Tage Thompson will be there. But I think what the United States did is they picked guys who are going to be hard to forecheck against because I think they fear that they're going to be in games against Canada and Sweden specifically where they're not as high scoring as everyone thinks and they're being played on NHL ice and they're going to be played a lot like NHL playoff games. And so that's why they gravitated towards guys like Vinny Trocheck and Chris Kreider and Brock Nelson who have had success doing that exact task in the postseason. Now, where I look at this roster and see incredible strength in the forward group is down the middle. Matthews, Larkin, and Jack Eichel is as good of a top three as you're going to get.
Yeah.
I mean, that's as if you had to pick three guys and say these are my three centers, even the Canadian team, I think, would be happy if those guys were their three centers. And they have McDavid and McKinnon and Crosby and Braden Point to pick from. Now, Stamkos didn't make their roster. Um, while we're talking about people that didn't make it, I know we already talked about Canada, but I'm looking at the rest of the U.S. roster, and oh, I didn't even bring up Hughes. right? You have your boy Jack
Yeah.
Hughes as well.
Well, you have a lot of like you do have some solid good talent. I just don't think the team you have for forwards is going to be the team that's going to get you far against Team Canada.
Well,
Just,
they don't have to beat Canada twice. They just got to beat them once. Because if they beat Sweden and Finland and they're 2-0, and then they lose to Canada, they're 2-1. Let's say Canada goes 3-0. Okay, as long as you have the head-to-head over Sweden and Finland, this tournament is set up to get Canada and US against each other in the final at TD Garden, which would be cinema.
you got to
But
score. You score.
what was that?
Got to score. It's going to come down to
I
points at
know
the
you
end.
got to score, but I mean, tragically, Johnny Gaudreau's not going to be on this team, and and that left a huge hole. I will undoubtedly say, obviously, it's a tragedy and it's one of the worst things to happen in NHL history for he and his brother to die. Of course, I'm not downplaying that, but I'm just saying you that's a tremendous loss because he was one of the best pure scorers that had ever been born in our country. Um, and he was a sniper. That season he had in Calgary a few years ago, he's a sniper. He would look great on this team from a multitude of reasons, and I hope they can win it for him. But I also look at this team, Kyle, and while I cede your point about Tage Thompson and Cole Caulfield specifically to an extent, I'm also looking at this team and I still see the Kachuk brothers and I see Gensel, who we haven't talked about, and I see Kyle Connor. Those are all good wingers that while we sadly don't have Gaudreau, we have those four guys too. So it's like I'm still bullish on this U.S. team. I'm not afraid of Team Canada. I think the United States needs to not be afraid of Team Canada in this tournament. I think you need to go right at them because on paper, even I think as a whole, our team is better.
We'll have to wait till February.
Well, yeah, and on defense, I like our defense better than theirs, and I like our goaltending better than theirs. So I'm but I'm still gonna probably pick Canada to win because they always seem to win these things. Um, but who do you? Okay, I've got a question for you.
Go ahead.
All right. Let's say Hellebuck gets hurt. Okay,
Okay.
that would suck for the Winnipeg Jets. Um,
You're gonna have,
Who are you bringing on as the third goalie? Is it Demko if he's healthy?
gosh, that's tough.
Because I think the other American goalies are, I want to say
Demko.
Joey Decord is American. Casey DeSmith is American. Nope, actually, Joey Decord is from Switzerland. So I was wrong. I think it's Demko.
I think you have to bring Demko if he's healthy. I mean, we'll find out tonight. He's playing for the first time this year. So
Yeah, I'm looking.
I
I'm trying to
really
figure out. Is it quick? How can I
yeah,
forget?
just put Jonathan Quick. That's all we need. Just bring us Jonathan Quick. That's who you bring up automatically. Jonathan Quick.
But then who do you start? Do you start Ottinger, Swayman, or Jonathan Quick? I'm going Ottinger if
Oh,
Hellebuck is hurt.
what are unders and Quick stats currently?
Oh man, I don't know, dude.
That's how I'd go off. Who's the hotter goalie this year?
Right now it's probably Ottinger. So right now, Jake Ottinger is, drum roll please, 14-6 with a 243 goals against and a 912 save percentage. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that's probably better than Jonathan Quick, but just to take a look, Jonathan Quick is 5-2-0 with a 258 and a 915. Okay, smaller sample size but similar numbers. I'd probably go Ottinger and then my boy
Andre,
Swayman. I'm not sure.
sorry,
Swayman could go on a heater though. I mean, anybody could. That's just why I bring up Hellebuck because Hellebuck has clearly been the best player, uh, one of the best players in the league this season. But if he's hurt, that's a huge blow to the U.S. chances. Um, anyway, we'll have plenty more time to talk about Four Nations face off. Um, I'm now sad because I'm thinking about um how awesome it would have been to have Johnny Hockey on the team. Then you
Yep.
could have had a line with R.I.P. Johnny Hockey and Kachuk reuniting from their record-breaking season in Calgary, and then down the middle you could have had like
Families of brothers
Matthews.
on the same team. Three families of brothers. Just think about that.
I know, isn't that awesome? I love that. Yeah, because the Kachucks, the Hugheses, and the yeah, we didn't even talk about Quinn Hughes. I mean, he's I mean, who's the other one?
Oh, frick, I forgot. I was thinking of Johnny's brother, but he wouldn't have made it.
Yes, yeah, you probably were. That I mean, that would have been an epic. But no, there is a third pair of brothers in the league. So obviously the Kachucks and the Hugheses are like
Yeah.
I forget who it is. I know the Felinos are brothers that they play for Minnesota and Chicago, but there's definitely another group. But yeah, the Hughes brothers, we get Jack. Well, Luke's a little too young, but he'll be on the Olympic team pretty
He's
soon.
not that young. I mean, Faber made it.
That's true, but Faber's having a really good season.
I mean, he's just probably the best young defenseman out there.
Yeah, I mean, the more I look at this team, the more I look at this USA defense, it's like they gotta sit. They've got they've got seven guys. One of them has to sit. Who are you sitting? Brock
Uh
Faber, Adam Fox, Noah Hanifin, Quinn Hughes, Charlie McAvoy, Jacob Slavin, Zach Werenski.
yeah, who you sitting?
I don't know who I'm sitting because Werenski's having a great year. Slavin is huge. I mean, he'll wreck you. And then Hughes is smaller, but he's more offensive, kind of like Faber. McAvoy and Hanifin are a little bit of both. Adam Fox is a little bit of both. That's hard. I don't know who you sit.
It's
That
like
should
with
have been the question I asked. Who are
you
you
should have,
sitting?
which forward do you sit?
Um, right now I'd probably sit Kreider.
Yeah. I'm saying Crichton.
Um, because Trocheck he can play center. Um, Brock Nelson, JT Miller's just I still think too talented. I probably sit Kreider or Boldy.
Ooh, that'd be good.
Um, and then yeah, I probably sit Swayman, but have him in the building. And then I probably have Jake Ottinger be the backup for Hellebuck.
All right, here I should ask you this question. Which forward from Team Canada do you sit?
All right, I got to go back and find that. All right.
And then
Pulling up
defenseman
the
would
image here just to make sure. I'm sitting, just looking at this, I'm probably sitting Sorelli. Um, or yeah, I'm probably sitting Sorelli or Stone. Stone, it might depend on health. Jarvis
yeah,
was
that's
a little bit of a surprise to make the team, but I think he deserves it. I wouldn't sit him. Sorelli, I think will be a matchup thing. I think you'll see Sorelli against the United States, but not against Sweden and Finland.
probably not.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, wow, jeez. All right, speaking of who to sit and start, dude, we got to talk about this. Um, my fantasy season is might be the most frustrating season. I'm like the anti Kansas City Chiefs. I read a stat earlier that the Chiefs, if it was a one score game, they lost instead of one, they'd be
Yep.
2-10 this year. Um, so my fantasy football season's great. I pulled out a Monday night miracle over Cam to secure the 2 seed. Friend of the show, Cam Chiesa. But my fantasy hockey season is I've lost, I think, 3 games by a combined 11 points.
Yikes.
If I had flipped those around, I'd be 6-3 and I'd be right there with you because I would have beaten Pat in one of them.
Yeah, you would have been up with me and Pat.
Yeah, well, I would have been ahead of Pat because one of them would have been head to head. Pat would have been 5-4.
True.
But instead, I'm down there in the basement with Shane. And I know this isn't great content for our listeners, but my team is so stacked. I don't understand how I'm not winning games. It's so frustrating. I've got like Eichel, Pasternak, Kachuk, Faber, who we just talked about. My goalie's Hellebuck, who we just talked about. It's so frustrating. Anyway, I just had to rant about that. Your team's pretty good.
My team is all like Panthers, Lightning, or Devils players.
That's a good sign because those are all good scoring teams, for sure. Um, yeah, I drafted Hellebuck high the last few years and he's paid off. I've never finished lower than second in our league in the 5 years it's gone on. Um, but it's kind of uh, kind of frustrating. All right, but you know
That's
what else is frustrating? That we've closed the end of our hour. It's time for me to go watch the Jets and the Bruins. Time for you to get some shut eye there.
oh, I've got the Maple Leaf Devils game.
Oh, is that on right now?
It is. It's 0-0 at the end of
Oh,
the first.
shoot. Damn. I took you away from
Sharks
that.
and Canes are
What was that?
Sharks and Canes are tied though.
Yeah, well, eh, the league is wide open this year. I think that's one thing for the last hour we've talked about a lot of different teams, and I think the one thing we can both say is that the league is pretty much wide open because even Winnipeg and Minnesota, they've had some playoff question marks in the last several years. So nothing's guaranteed. Um, but I appreciate all of you tuning in and listening to us tonight. It was fun to talk some puck and dedicate some time to it. We'll be back probably during the Christmas break to check in on where we are, maybe have some more hypothetical Four Nations talk, which I enjoy. That's one thing that Kyle, you and I were really keen on them doing is bringing back international hockey, and they've done it. So I'm excited for that. Kyle, anything left to say before we bid adieu and au revoir to our listeners across the world?
Nothing. Just everyone have a great holiday
That's
break
right.
that's coming on. If you haven't done your Christmas shopping, get it done.
That's right. You heard it here first from Santa's number one elf. He's Kyle Diesel. I'm Will Highland. Everyone have a great holiday season. If we don't catch you then, um, check us out after the break. We'll have plenty more to do. Take care, everyone. Thanks for listening to Odd Man Rush.